A Pup Named Scooby-Doo was the 8th Scooby-Doo series. It aired from 1988 to 1991 and featured the original 5 members of the gang solving mysteries as kids. Its unique style provided a lot of fun episodes, and I'm here to talk about my favorites. Number 10 is The Schnook Who Took My Comic Book. In this episode, Shaggy brings the gang to a comic book convention to buy a first edition comic book he wants. However, the villain of the comic, named Dr. Croaker, shows up to try and steal the book. The setting is a unique one for Scooby-Doo, and while Dr. Croaker does look a bit ridiculous, I actually like him as the villain. Because the episode takes place in only one location, the convention has the opportunity to be a lot more fleshed out, but it doesn't end up that way. My biggest complaint with the episode is how the setting felt very 2D. The convention lacked a lot of character for all of its uniqueness. I did enjoy how the monster didn't steal the comic book right away, which meant that the audience knows that the gang is going to be a target for the monster going forward. I liked the introduction of Selma the comic book seller, because she's a new character introduced that is nice and never under suspicion by the gang. For a good chunk of the episode, I thought that she could have actually been the culprit. It's a bit of a strange episode that feels like they hadn't quite gotten the hang of Pup Named Scooby-Doo formula. This makes the episode stand out in some positive ways, but also a few negative ones. Number 9 is The Spirit of Rock and Roll. In this episode, the gang goes to see the famous rock star Buddy Chilner perform when a rock and roll ghost shows up to ruin the concert and try and kidnap Buddy. I think that the 50s rock-inspired episode is a really cool idea that's executed well. The ghost of Purvis Parker is one of my favorites from A Pup Named Scooby-Doo. His design is fantastic. The episode does a good job of moving the gang around to different locations to search for clues. A standout scene for me is when Purvis Parker rises from the pond behind the gang.
Get out of Parker, please!
It's the ghost of Purvis! Like it's time for the chase!
Another standout with this episode is the music. It definitely lives up to the episode's musical theming. If I had to lay out some criticism on why this episode isn't higher up on the list, the mystery itself was subpar, and I didn't find the suspects very interesting, but the fun factor on the episode still makes it memorable. Number 8 is Wanted Cheddar Alive. When Scooby runs out of Scooby snacks, the gang realizes that they're no longer being manufactured because the factory making them is haunted by a cheese monster. One thing that A Pup Named Scooby-Doo does well is make the mysteries much more personal for Scooby and the gang. The Schnook Who Took My Comic Book does this with Shaggy and his comics, but I think that Wanted Cheddar Alive is an even better example. Scooby snacks are such an established thing in Scooby-Doo, at this point, that a monster that stops the production of them is a definite threat that must be stopped. This is one of those episodes that doesn't have much that stands out, but does everything very well. This makes it difficult to talk about at length. Besides the premise, the only other thing that really stands out to me is the chase song. It's another of the best from the series. Number 7 is Curse of the Collar. Scooby and the gang are spending some time with Scooby's family, when Scooby is given a jeweled collar that's a family heirloom. Even though he doesn't like it much, he finds himself chased by the ghost of Buster McMuttmuller, a dog catcher that's after his collar. This is yet another episode of A Pup Named Scooby-Doo's mysteries being close to the gang. The ghost of Buster McMuttmuller is great, and his appearance is easily the best of the entire series.
It's a present for the Doo Pups! Oh boy!
That collar is mine!
This mystery feels like it passes by too quickly, unfortunately, but I do love pretty much every scene the ghost is in, and the extra small scale mystery is effective. Number 6 is RoboPup. Here's where we really start getting to my favorite episodes. Daphne shows the gang her bedroom, but is shocked to find that everything has been stolen. It's revealed that the person taking all of her things is the ghost of Chef Pierre Goulash. In order to help the gang solve the case, the security guard, Mr. Gordon, enlists the help of RoboPup, a robotic dog that Scooby becomes jealous of. In order to better talk about this episode, I'm going to need to get into spoilers, so if you haven't seen it yet, you have been warned. Mr. Gordon makes for one of the most compelling villains of any Scooby-Doo episode because of his previous relationship with the Blake family. It makes total sense why he would lend Robopup to help with their investigation, because he probably would have guessed that the gang would try and solve the case. To that point, Robopup is a very interesting character, as he's a source of resentment for Scooby because he seems to add more to the gang than Scooby. However, Scooby gets a nice redeeming moment at the end when he takes down Robopup. Chef Goulash is another fun pup named Scooby-Doo monster, and the fact that he's a ghost but also a chef makes for an interesting response from Shaggy and Scooby.
You mean a ghost that cooks food?
Yeah, I was scared and yet mysteriously attracted to him at the same time.
It doesn't rank any higher simply because the setting isn't too interesting and the ending talked about in the spoiler section didn't give me as much catharsis as I hoped for. Number 5 is Lights, Camera, Monster. Fred gets a camera for his birthday and decides he's going to make a monster movie at the mall. When there, the gang stumbles across Stinkweed, a monster that's robbing all of the stores in the mall. The idea of theming an episode around a mall monster is a fun one, as the mall is a great setting for a Scooby-Doo episode. I'm starting to realize just how much emphasis I place on a great setting. I find that a great setting sets the tone for the rest of the episode, and sets an episode up for success. Stinkweed is a great monster with a unique voice, and the episode does a pretty good job of throwing the audience off to who the culprit really is. As with Wanted Cheddar Live, not much stands out about the episode, because everything in it is pretty great. Number 4 is Ghost Who's Coming to Dinner. While out trick-or-treating, the gang stumbles across a haunted house. The couple living there say the ghost is friendly, but they are proven wrong when the ghost pirate Boobeard shows up and tells them they have to leave the house. Mr. Boo, the real ghost living in the house, ends up asking the gang if they can catch the rotten ghost that's giving him a bad name. The concept of this episode is one that's really interesting, and stands out among a pup named Scooby-Doo episodes. The audience feels compelled to want to see the gang succeed even more than normal because of the plight of Mr. Boo, who is a charming and friendly little ghost. Although I do like Boobeard, I feel like a pirate ghost could be better utilized in a different mystery. There isn't really any reason for him to be a pirate ghost over any other type of ghost. Everything else, though, is well done, but it's the strong emotional backbone of this story that gets it into my top 4. Number 3 is No Place Like Home. In this episode, the gang travels to a ski chalet to go skiing, but it's haunted by an ice demon. This is probably the second best mystery in the series. All of the suspects want to buy the land that the chalet is on for various reasons, giving them all clear motives. The inclusion of the mine makes for a great set piece, and the chase and chase music absolutely deliver. The episode also feels like it goes on longer than it does, which is a bonus. I also love how finally the gang catches the culprit in the midst of changing out of his costume. In Scooby-Doo, the people behind the ghost seemingly have the ability to walk off screen for a second and then reappear as the monster. So it's nice to see someone finally get caught in the act of changing out of their monster suit. The only small criticisms I have is that the episode can feel slow-paced at times, which is likely the reason why it feels extra long. A Bicycle Built for Boo. This episode is a perfect introduction to a pup named Scooby-Doo. Shaggy's introduced to be just an ordinary kid with a paper route, but as he gets up one day to start it, a monster appears and steals his bike. This is the perfect small-scale start to a series that usually deals with bigger, more complicated plots. This is just the gang simply trying to track down who stole Shaggy's bike. I may have this so high on my list because I had just come off hours and hours of Scrappy-Doo filled Scooby-Doo content, but this episode was the perfect reintroduction to a pup named Scooby-Doo. I had a giddy smile on my face throughout the runtime. It does have its flaws, the suspects aren't interesting and the mystery is subpar, but it's such a fantastic introduction to the series that I don't get stuck on the faults like I might with other episodes. Before we get to my number 1 pick, let's go over some honorable mentions. Horror of the Haunted Hairpiece, Chickenstein Lives, Now Museum, Now You Don't, The Computer Walks Among Us, and The Sludge Monster from the Earth's Core. And now, my number one Pup Named Scooby-Doo episode is Scooby-Dude. The gang is hired by Velma's aunt to find out what is happening to the disappearing dolphins at the Marine Institute. They discover that they're being dolphin napped by the headless skateboarder. This was pretty clearly my favorite episode. The beachfront setting is great and used well. The headless skateboarder is one of my favorite ghouls from the series, and the mystery is easily the best in the series. I'm gonna need to get into spoiler territory to discuss why I love this episode so much. So if you haven't seen it, please seek it out and watch it before you listen to the rest of what I have to say. What makes this episode so great is only 2 letters. It's Al of Al's Skateboard-O-Rama. You see, when you watch all the episodes of a Scooby-Doo series in a row like I do for these videos, you begin to notice patterns. One of these patterns that I noticed are with the suspects. With a pup named Scooby-Doo, it's typically the suspect that's investigated the least, and or seems the most friendly that is the culprit. In Scooby-Dude, there are 3 primary suspects. Gnarly Charlie is suspicious because he acts like the headless skateboarder and also has a motive. Sandy Sneakers was suspicious because her Jeep's tire tracks would appear where the monster showed up. Because she was kind of tacked on as one of the villains at the end, I don't consider her to be a true culprit of this episode. And Al was the 3rd suspect, the one the gang initially investigated because he owned a skateboard shop. He originally tells them that he can't skateboard, but when the gang finds evidence that he used to be a champion skateboarder, he confesses to being really good in the past, but getting mixed up with drugs that got him thrown into jail. This is fascinating for numerous reasons. First, Al seems to have thrown aside all suspicions that the gang had of him, because he seemingly wants to move past that part of his life. The other reason why this is noteworthy is because this is the first, and to my knowledge, only time drugs are mentioned in Scooby-Doo. It's a fairly common reason why crimes are committed in real life, but in the Scooby-Doo family-friendly universe, it's usually real estate scams. I find that to be super interesting. To top off the mind-blowing things going on in this episode, Al is eventually revealed to be the culprit, and using the dolphins to smuggle drugs. To have the villain of the episode lie right to these kids' faces, and then be caught doing the same thing that he says ruined his life, makes him one of the most despicable criminals the Scooby-Doo crew has ever caught, and easily the best culprit in this series and potentially any other Scooby-Doo series. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to let me know what you think about Scooby-Doo or any of the other Pup Named Scooby-Doo episodes, mentioned or not mentioned in this video. I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say. If you haven't already and were interested enough in the video to make it to the end, I'd be appreciative if you subscribed. I'll be continuing my Scooby-Doo Top 10 series with What's New Scooby-Doo, but before I make that video, I'm going to be focusing more on making Scooby-Doo videos focused on specific episodes or movies. Stay tuned for that and have a wonderful day.